Hi everyone, Janelle here. I'm a functional nutritionist and doctor of natural medicine. This is my podcast where we talk about midlife wellness in the mountains. Today, my friend and colleague Allie Anderson joined me to discuss the microbiome, why it's important for anyone wanting to improve health, and our favorite ways to improve it. Allie is a functional nutrition coach who specializes in helping people with autoimmune conditions. We chatted about leaky gut, chronic inflammation, hormones, cravings, and more. I know you're going to love this one as much as I did. Be sure to share it with a pal who cares about optimizing health, and let me know what you do to take care of your microbiome, especially if we didn't mention it. Welcome, everybody, and welcome, Allie. I am so excited we are doing this and tackling such a gigantic and important topic. So, I love so much about you, Allie. I love how you practice. I love how you offer what you do to the women you work with. And you and I have been functional nutrition colleagues for a lot of years, and we've worked closely in a few different ways. So, I know that you dig deep into the research and the systems biology and present it to your clients in a way that is super clear and easy to understand and improves their health. So I love all that about you, but I really love that we're friends also. So thank you so much for being here.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And right back at you. I love the way that you practice and the way that you think through the systems biology yourself. And I love bouncing ideas off with you. And I'm really looking forward to talking today.
Oh, me too. Okay. So, yeah, we both work pretty similarly, but we also both work with women who want to understand their body, who are already making a lot of healthy choices, but not reaching their health goals. And the longer I do this, the more I see how much the microbiome is a factor here. So it's almost overwhelming to talk about. We laughed about this before we hit record because it really does relate to everything in the body, both acute symptoms and chronic issues. It's almost like you can draw everything back to the microbiome somehow. So, plus, our modern world makes it really hard to have a healthy microbiome, and it makes it essential for everyone to work on this. So, let's attempt to break this down for everybody in a way that's helpful and clear. So, first off, what is the microbiome?
Well, that's a big question in and of itself. And the microbiome is really a complex ecosystem and throughout our entire body. And many people think of it as only in the gut, but it really begins in the mouth and goes all the way through our entire digestive system. Microbiome is also on our skin. The microbiome is in our lungs. The microbiome is in our urinary tract. Our entire body is really made up of a microbiome. And today we might be focusing more a little bit on the gut microbiome and what's in the digestive system. But honestly, it's throughout the entire body. And it's bacteria and it's fungi and it's viruses, it's everything.
Brilliant. Okay, so and then one more thing let's define before we move any farther is what's dysbiosis?
So dysbiosis is an imbalance between our good bacteria and our bad bacteria. All of us have plenty of good bacteria and plenty of bad bacteria, but we really want a good balance of more good bacteria than bad bacteria. And dysbiosis means we have too much bad bacteria and not enough good bacteria.
Okay, so that balance is really important when we start to talk about the different body systems that it impacts. So,
Yes.
so okay, how are we going to dive into this? Let's take a few body systems that interact closely with our microbiome and those metabolites and see what happens.
Okay.
So, so first of all, some common ones that you and I work with because we work so much with people with digestion would be SIBO and H. pylori. What can we say about that?
Sure. So SIBO is really an overgrowth of bad bacteria in the small intestine. We're not supposed to, our bacteria is supposed to live in our large intestine. SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So we've had the bacteria has gotten into the small intestine, and now we have this overgrowth in the small intestine where it's not supposed to be. And that can cause a lot of uncomfortable symptoms for people. Mostly it's bloating or constipation is what people mostly complain about when they have SIBO. Sometimes it can be seen as diarrhea as well. But more often than not, people start to just feel bloated and overloaded in their gut. And it's really because too much bacteria is in the small intestine and it's fermenting. And it's growing. Fermenting means it's growing. If you can imagine like bread fermenting, it's growing. And so when that is hanging out in our small intestine, that's when we feel that big bloating. Sometimes people say they wake up feeling bloated. Sometimes it's after they eat. There's different times of day, but if you're feeling unusually bloated, it's likely that you have too much overgrowth in your small intestine, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is SIBO.
Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. And I find so many people removing so much fiber and thinking they've solved the problem in this situation, but
Right.
really you've just removed what's causing your symptoms. Not you have not resolved the problem.
Correct,
So,
right?
because the problem is in your microbiome. So
Yeah,
we need to, yes, maybe remove for a little bit, but then repair the microbiome. So SIBO is really interesting and I find it confuses a ton, mostly everybody. Okay. And then H. pylori is just an overgrowth of a not very happy bacteria for our stomach to have. We don't want too much H. pylori, right?
absolutely. And everybody has a little bit of H. pylori, but you don't want the overgrowth of H. pylori.
Right. It's all about that balance.
Absolutely.
So, and there's tons more, but those are just a couple of the acute imbalances that can happen. Okay. And so then it gets a little bit more interesting as we move into the immune system. And I know this is a big one for you because you work with a lot of women with autoimmune issues. That's one of
Mhm.
your big specialties. So
Yep.
I know the immune system is big. So let's talk for a second about the microbiome and the immune system, which you cannot separate these two, right?
True. Very true. So, it's interesting. The microbiome, they say over 90% of our immune system actually lives inside of our gut. And so we really have to put a lot of attention to how healthy our gut is when we're looking at our immune system. And if I could go on a little tangent here, is when our gut is nice and healthy, everything is digesting throughout the digestive system from our mouth all the way to our exit pathways. But when we have something what's called leaky gut, or it's called increased intestinal permeability, we start to see what we're digesting leaking out of our digestive tract and getting into our bloodstream. And we can circle back to leaky gut if you like, but it's when things that are supposed to stay in our digestive tract get into our bloodstream, our immune system sees it as a foreign invader. And when our immune system sees something as a foreign invader, the immune system revs up and says, I've got to go attack that foreign invader. And when the immune system revs up, it creates a giant inflammatory response throughout the entire body, but it certainly does create a constant inflammation. And if we are constantly, every time we eat, things are leaking out, you can imagine our immune system is constantly fighting against this foreign invader that's gotten into the bloodstream.
Yeah, and I feel like leaky gut could be an overwhelming conversation on its own. So the fact that
True.
we're just like biting off a little chunk of it is pretty awesome if you ask me. But yeah, I think this is so important, everything that you're saying. And what we really need to keep in mind is that that microbiome really is a protective layer. Like it is our body's most protective layer, physically protective
Yeah.
and in a more cellular level because it creates that mucus layer that guards higher digestive system top to bottom. So
Mhm.
we need that microbiome to be healthy and in the right balance and in the right place to serve as protection. And when it's not doing its job as protection, exactly, we can get that hyperpermeable membrane, the leaky gut. And I just need to pause here and laugh for a second because my husband's a physician.
Uh-huh.
And back when I started practicing functional nutrition, a long time ago, I remember the research just wasn't there. And he was like, leaky gut, that is so in the clouds and that doesn't even exist. Well, okay, now we have so much data on leaky gut and hyperpermeable membrane. So I'm super stoked that there's so much research coming out thanks to Kiran Krishnan and so many other microbiologists and research scientists. But so now we know that hyperpermeable membranes in our small intestine do in fact happen. And when they do, exactly what you said, it sends an alarm to the immune system and it's overreacting, and inflammation and so many things downstream are a result of this. So, and we get bacteria leaking in, mold leaking in, viruses, and then, of course, those food particles that you
Mhm.
talked about. So, this is massive because now we're already talking into gateway it into our bloodstream.
Absolutely. And we're talking about chronic inflammation. So when we're looking about aging and aging well and extending our health span, we really need to reduce chronic inflammation. And it has to begin with taking care of the microbiome.
It has to. And there's research articles about Alzheimer's, Parkinson's,
Yep.
cardiovascular disease. So many of these diseases related to aging, yeah, have a root for sure in the microbiome.
Yep.
So we need to pause here and just mention LPS for a second.
Okay.
Okay. Lipopolysaccharides. No one needs to remember that name. Don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but we do need to talk about it because it's just an important player here. So, can you
I
touch on
sure,
that?
sure. So lipopolysaccharides are endotoxins. They're toxins that are released by bad bacteria in the gut. And that's okay if it stays in the gut. But the problem is so many of us have an intestinal permeability, leaky gut. And so it's leaching out of our gut and it's getting into our blood. It's a toxin getting into our blood. When we see lipopolysaccharides elevated levels inside the bloodstream is when it wreaks havoc. Just about everything else we've been talking about, the immune system is on high alert. Wow, this toxin's gotten into our system. We have to go attack that. And it's okay if any toxin gets into the system and the immune system goes, attacks it, and gets rid of it, right? But it's when it's just a constant influx of this bad bacteria releasing an endotoxin, LPS getting into our bloodstream, and our immune system is like, I'm trying to kill it. And it just keeps coming. And then we are in a chronic state of inflammation. And as we mentioned, chronic state of inflammation leads to all kinds of negative downstream effects.
Yeah, so many. We're talking metabolic issues, crossing the blood brain barrier, joints,
Yep.
brain fog, memory problems, even like the HPA axis, like so many things can be impacted by these LPS that we don't want in our bloodstream. Keep it in
Yeah.
our gut, send it through. So, again, we're really wanting that good integrity of our microbiome so it can protect us from all of this. Awesome. Anything else there, immune, or can we move on? Because we have so much.
We have a lot. I think we can move on.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. We'll circle
Immune
back if we.
is a big one. Let's move next into briefly hormones and the endocrine system. So I know that a change in our microbiome can impact the mucus in our vagina, vaginal atrophy, definitely our pH, which makes us more susceptible to yeast infections and bladder infections and all of that. But what other ways does the microbiome impact our hormones or vice versa?
Sure. So, especially as we talk about aging, as we decrease our ability to make hormones as we're getting older, it changes actually the bacterial makeup inside of the body, and so and that can change a lot of things when we have again too much bad bacteria, not enough good bacteria, and all the downstream effects that come with that. One of the things that we see from that can impact hormones is bacteria releasing an enzyme called beta glucuronidase. And when beta glucuronidase is excreted from the bacteria inside of our gut system, we can see an excess estrogen. And when we have too much estrogen in our system, that can wreak a lot of havoc inside of our body. And so we need to be aware of how these different bacteria can impact our hormonal fluctuations throughout our entire life, but certainly as we start to get into midlife and transitioning into menopause as well. So it's important to pay attention to all of these different um, markers for how our hormones are impacting our gut bacteria and vice versa. It goes both ways. So our bacteria impacts our hormones and our hormones impact our bacteria. And we need there's a lot of attention to be paid to making sure our hormones are balanced and our bacteria is balanced so that there is a nice flow back and forth. And our body stays in what's called homeostasis. Our body stays in a good balance.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And especially, I love that you said homeostasis because as our hormones shift, our homeostasis becomes really wonky for a while.
For
So,
sure.
anything we can do to any efforts we can make to really support our microbiome are going to help both those monthly symptoms that we get when we're cycling, and then also the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause for the exact reasons you just mentioned. So, thank you. I think that's really important. Let's discuss some things that harm and that support the microbiome. So, let's dig in first to like what harms the microbiome, because why do we have to pay attention to this? Our ancestors did not have to pay attention to this. So why the heck do we? Like, what's so harmful?
So our ancestors didn't eat a lot of processed foods.
Yes. Okay.
And
So
a lot of
processed foods.
chemically made foods, right? So much of the food we eat today, just in general in America, you turn over the food label and it's made with foods you can't even pronounce. That's chemically made food. That's really hard for our body to digest it, to break it down, to absorb nutrients. So one of the big things is get rid of as much processed food as you possibly can. And what I say is just eat something that would come naturally from the earth, right? So anything that grows naturally from the earth would be amazing. Also, I am a proponent of animal protein, high quality animal protein, and I consider that coming naturally from the earth. And then, but anything that's processed, there's way too much processed food in this world. There's way too much processed oil. Um, all of that is going to disrupt our microbiome. It's going to disrupt the good bacteria, and it's going to create too much bad bacteria. Other things that can impact it, antibiotics in general, we are ingesting too many antibiotics. One, I think they're probably being overprescribed. I think doctors are backing down on that a little bit now, but our history has been overprescribed. The food that we eat is a lot of the animal protein we eat is fed antibiotics, and it's fed that so that if we think about a cow, they feed the antibiotics so the cow doesn't get sick, so the cow fattens up so that they have more meat to sell, which makes sense. But we want to avoid food that has been fed antibiotics. We want to avoid vegetables, fruits and vegetables that have been sprayed with chemicals that are breaking it down. So the glyphosate is a big word. We want to avoid as much toxic chemicals that are being sprayed as possible. So I recommend always to eat organic as much as possible. If you need to limit how much you're purchasing organic, then always go to EWG and purchase the Dirty Dozen. Those must be organic because those are sprayed heavily with pesticides to keep the bugs away so that the fruit grows really big. But we want to eat as much, which would just go naturally from the earth. So those are impacting our microbiome. Unfortunately, alcohol is impacting our microbiome negatively. Generally speaking, I think that as a society, we're probably consuming too much alcohol. And I'm not going to speak into whether a little bit or a lot, but I do think that alcohol is negatively impacting our gut microbiome, and it's killing off the good bacteria. And it's a breeding ground for the bad bacteria to grow.
Mhm.
Um, Other medications can affect it as well. I'm a big proponent of medications when you need them, but sometimes I think they can be overprescribed. I think what really big thing is stress. We are living a very stressed out world. That's naturally how we in America choose to live. We choose to live sort of in a very fast-paced world. And when our body is stressed, it doesn't take the time to populate and regrow the good bacteria. And so I think that we all need to take it down a notch. And we could talk about stress for hours, right?
Mhm.
All the things that cause stress inside of our body. But I think that's a big one that also causes an imbalance in our good bacteria versus our bad bacteria.
Yeah, those are all so big. I said processed foods, antibiotics, pesticides, specifically glyphosate, which kills the bacteria just like it kills the pests on food,
Mhm.
alcohol, and stress. These are so big. Absolutely. The only thing I would add is maybe like a lot of sugar foods,
Good. Yes.
which feed some bad bugs, and even eating all day
Yes, good point.
can promote, and maybe we'll get back more into that when we talk about things to help. But snacking all day from dawn to dusk can feed, some of the pesky microbes. How about cesarean birth?
True.
Yeah, cesareans save lives. I mean, of course, I had one, but we need to consider that when we are considering our microbiome. So even if we've lived our whole life in a microbiome positive way, that would have impact us for sure. Okay, so those are all some big ones that damage our microbiome. How about like what can people do? What are some things that really help the microbiome?
Well, again, I'd say eating fruits and vegetables as much as possible. I think because of things that we've already talked about. First of all, they're full of good probiotics in and of themselves, just in the actual food itself. They're full of prebiotics, which feed the probiotics. They are full of nutrients, and so if we can slow down and we can eat fruits and vegetables as often as possible, we are going to increase good bacteria in our body.
Okay, wait, let's pause there for 1
Yep,
second because I
of
just want
course.
to reiterate what we said earlier, which is like if you're someone who wants to improve their microbiome and you try to introduce a ton of fruits and vegetables and you get that massive bloating and it feels horrible, you get constipated or whatever happens, let's just double click on the point that that means that's a sign. That's a sign that's telling you you have a dysbiosis in your gut.
Yes.
So you may need to slow down and do some repair work, but you don't want to eliminate those foods forever.
True. I'm glad you paused there. That's a really, really good point. And usually it's a sign that you need to work with a practitioner because there is some kind of giant dysbiosis, oftentimes in the small intestine. We talked about before the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and it needs to be addressed and treated so that you can continue to eat the fruits and vegetables because they're so nutrient dense. They're really important to include in your diet. So we don't want to remove them permanently.
Right. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Move on. That was a good place to start.
I think, let's see, we're looking at things to improve the microbiome. I think we also need to make sure we're breaking down. You already talked about, making sure we have enough stomach acid, making sure that we are making enough enzymes. And so I'll start with really basic to make sure, really basic is making sure you're chewing your food. And I know that sounds silly, and some people might be sort of like phasing out right here, but the truth is we don't chew our food enough in America. We are just always so fast paced. We are busy, and we're oftentimes just sort of like gobbling it down as quickly as possible. If you think about chewing your food, you will realize, oh my gosh, I don't really slow down to chew my food. And I'll tell you why it's important. It's important because it actually signals to the body to start releasing what is necessary to break down the food. So as soon as we start moving our mouth up and down, it says, hey, body, we're about to ingest carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and we need the proper enzymes to be released from the gallbladder, from everywhere from our inside of our stomach, so that we can break it down appropriately and absorb our nutrients. So slowing down and chewing our food. I know that sounds simple and basic and probably something you prefer to skip over, but it's so important. That's really hard for the body to absorb nutrients if we're not even chewing the food to begin with. We can bring in things like you can bring in hydrochloric acid, you can bring in enzymes, digestive enzymes as a supplement, and those are beneficial and helpful and often recommended. But again, if we're not chewing our food, you're asking your body to do a lot because you've just put a pretty big piece of food down into your system, into your stomach, and you're asking your stomach to do a lot to break it down if you're not chewing it to begin with.
Yes, those are so important. If you need support of those digestive secretions, making sure you get those. And again, that might need require working with a practitioner. What else you got for us, Allie?
Okay, you can bring in foods that are rich in probiotics, right? So this can be as simple as drinking something like a low sugar kombucha, or there's a drink out there called Kavita, which is fermented water. But it can also be bringing in things like yogurt and kimchi and sauerkraut. Those are so rich in probiotics that they just really populate inside the gut and help increase our good bacteria. So that's an easy way. Just include that in your diet on a regular basis. There are a lot of really good sauerkrauts now available at the grocery store. And they have different flavor profiles, which is really fun because you can add it to anything from scrambled eggs to a dish you have at dinner or anything. Um, that's really good. Prebiotics, we want to make sure we're bringing in plenty of foods that are prebiotics. I already mentioned those are the fruits and vegetables. Those actually feed the probiotics in the gut. So I tell my clients every single meal needs to have some kind of vegetable included in it. For a variety of reasons. I have everybody start with a vegetable of some kind, but if you can just say to yourself, every time I sit down, I'm going to be eating some kind of vegetable, whether that's a green or a vegetable or it just some kind of naturally grown food from the earth into my diet. And I usually say begin with it because that way you know what's in your diet.
And I'll just have to add, I love your suggestion so far to that one. If it can be diverse, so if you can switch
Yeah.
it up and eat different fibers to feed those bacteria, and also super colorful because it's those polyphenols that have different constituents that feed the microbiome also. So colorful and diverse. I know we're getting picky, but
Well,
I
you know,
both of us work with people who want to do this right and make a big difference, and that makes a big difference.
it makes a huge difference. And you can really think about it in a very simple way. Just think about it, have it in your refrigerator, have the colored foods in your refrigerator, and just think I'm going to reach the yesterday I ate some red foods or some red and orange foods. Today I'm going to make sure I pull out some yellows and some greens and maybe some blues. So maybe maybe blueberries are already like washed in your refrigerator. You can just grab them and eat them.
That's
I try to work with my clients and I just encourage everyone who's listening just to think, how can I simplify this as much as possible? And if you said, I can't cut up a red pepper and an orange pepper and a yellow pepper every single day, then just cut up one and eat the red pepper and then move on. And then the next day or 3 days, if red pepper takes you 2 days, then on the third day, eat the yellow pepper. Just do as much as you can to diversify the color and the type that you can include in your diet.
that's
And
a
just
great tip.
how can I simplify it as much as possible?
I love that. That's a good one. Okay, anything else you want to add? A couple others?
Diversifying the microbiome. We talked about all the different ways you can include food. I always just think, you know what I actually tell my clients often, I said, think of yourself as a vegetarian who eats high quality meat. Well, that's not a vegetarian, right? But when you're going to include meat, include high quality meat, include organic meat, grass-fed meat, things that are not laden with other antibiotics and pesticides and things like that. That's so, and then think about including fish as much as possible. Those are full of omega-3 fatty acids, which are very anti-inflammatory to the to the gut as well. And if you are not comfortable eating fish, then you can include something like an omega-3 fatty acid supplement, because omega-3 fatty acids are really anti-inflammatory to the entire gut lining. And that's what we want to do, is decrease the inflammation response in the gut lining. So
Yeah,
those
that's
are what,
such an important point. I mean, yeah. Thank you for speaking into that. Anything you can do to support reduce inflammation in the gut and that mucus lining. So that's really good. Can I add cleaning
yes,
products
yes,
to try to avoid super harsh cleaning products when you can? And essential oils and water can go a long way. Of course, when your toilet bowl and things like that, that's gross. You can disinfect that. But other than that, really, I think we're over disinfecting our world. And what else? Time in outside, like the dirt. I love
yes,
that one. Hiking,
yes,
gardening, any time playing in dirt. Oh, one other one I wanted to mention, sleep.
yes.
Supporting your circadian rhythm, because your microbes also have a circadian rhythm. So anything to support that, which already hopefully you're doing because it's so important, but your microbes care also. I mean, we could probably
It's
list a million,
yes.
but those
Oh,
are
everything
big
you said
ones.
is so important. And I think maybe often overlooked when we're talking about the microbiome, right? But you're absolutely right that sleep is so important to the microbiome. And like you said, playing in the dirt as much as possible. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that we've missed in our youth, because now so many children are inside, they're not outside in the dirt as much, just playing. And so that's why it's even extra important that we all get outside and breathe in the sun, breathe in the microbes that are coming from the trees and the grass and everything else, and just really take that in, relax the body,
Yeah,
and
stress.
touch the soil with your feet, touch the soil with your hands
Yeah, it's
on the ground.
awesome. And then are there any like specific booster foods you like to support the microbiome?
Well, as you mentioned, colored foods, anything. I love blueberries, blackberries. I love omega-3 fatty acids in any way that I can get those in. Chia seeds, flax seeds are really great. I love nuts and seeds for the microbiome. Um, what else? I love fruits and vegetables. I mean, greens are so important. I love arugula. Arugula fits a lot of the categories because it fits sort of the green category. It's also a bitter that helps our digestive juices flow and helps us break down our foods. There's a lot of great nutrients inside something like arugula.
That's
So
a
I think
great point about bitters, stimulating bile and digestive secretions. That's really good. I love pomegranate seeds
oh yes, good
and
one.
chickpeas and my one of my favorites is green banana flour
Oh
for
yes,
feeding the microbiome. That's one of my favorites.
good.
Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned chickpeas. I think beans have gotten sort of a bad rap lately, and I think that beans are really, really good for our digestive system as well.
Yeah, so good, and fruits. Fruits are really good
Mhm.
for our digestive
Yes,
system and our
yes.
microbiome. So I'm a big fan. Okay, so Allie, we've covered so much. Thank
Yeah.
you. What would you want everybody to know about the microbiome? Or like what would you want to scream from the top of the mountain about the microbiome?
One thing, there's a lot. I would say if I had to just say one thing, I don't think we're eating enough from the earth. I think we need to eat more from the earth. And that can be you can go to the grocery store and buy it, but just think, did it come from the earth naturally? And increase that as every single meal should have food that grew naturally from the earth.
Even
I think
breakfast, Allie?
yes, even breakfast. And actually, most importantly, breakfast.
Most importantly,
Most
breakfast.
importantly, breakfast. I think we all think of breakfast as being bagels or pancakes or something like that. I love when you can think of breakfast as a satiating food, like it's something, maybe it's left over from dinner last night or something like that. When I tell my clients that I take my scrambled eggs and put them on top of my arugula and actually put like an olive oil dressing on top of it, they're like, what? I never thought of arugula for breakfast. It's delicious. It's a wonderful way to start the day. And so just think beyond what is a stereotypical breakfast food and how can I bring in really nutrient dense foods right from the get-go, and the rest of your day will feel so much better. I know that in other podcasts you'll talk about blood sugars and you'll talk about other imbalances, and this one's on the microbiome. This was a great way to set up your microbiome for the day, but it's also a great way to set up so many other things for your entire day.
Yeah, and everyone can do it starting now. So
Yes.
I love tips like that. So that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Allie. Thank you so much for all of your insights. Where can people find you if they want to find you?
They can find me at my home address, my home website, which is allieandersonwellness.com. I'm on
Awesome.
social under the same names, allieandersonwellness.com.
Great. Thank you, Allie. It was so good to
Thank you,
talk.
Janelle. Thanks for having me. It was wonderful to chat with you.
That's it for this week. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a comment and a review as that helps it reach more people. You can find me and the courses I teach, the Midlife Hormone Club and the Energy Club, online at Mountain Rebalance. I help midlife women understand their body and age better. If that sounds like you, please join my newsletter. And if there's a topic you'd like me to cover here or an expert you want me to have on, let me know. In the meantime, keep playing, and here's to aging our best.